Hi everyone, today we're going to look at setting up expressions, equations and formula, alright? So normally the way this is going to come from, you've got something which is written down in words, and from that we need to kind of put some algebraic expression, equation or a formula to it in order to be able to deal with it, alright? So we're going to look at all three at this point. So we're going to look at some of the terminology, some of the kind of questions involved, and how you go about kind of approaching those different things, alright? So we're going to be able to write a problem as an expression with letters and numbers. All right, so I'm going to show you some examples. Obviously, this is not all encompassing, and no doubt when it comes to an assessment, they'll try and twist and turn it. Right, but some of the concepts here are absolutely valid in terms of what you need to know. So if I said to you, a number increased by 5, all right, so what that means is you've got a number, and we don't know what that number is, but we're going to increase it by 5. So we're going to add 5 to it, essentially. So if I was going to write that in an expression, there's two things I can use as a letter. It tends to be either an N, so represent a number, or an X, all right? And because we're dealing with a number, N is probably the most appropriate at this point in time, but when we're adding 5 to it, it's going to be plus 5, all right? So for whatever reason, they've gone for X, and it doesn't really matter. Hopefully in the exam, they'll probably tell you what variable to use, but a number increased by 5, so we can call a number, in this case X then. X is increased by 5, so it's X plus 5, all right? Whatever that is, all right? So write an expression for the cost of 8 apples, all right? So again, trying to think about what that actually means. Well, if I said an apple cost 10p, then the cost of 8 apples would be 8 times 10, wouldn't it? 8 times 10. But we don't know what the cost of the actual apple is. So we have to give the cost of an apple a letter, and then represent how we would work that out, not knowing what that cost is. So eventually we can call one apple, or a cost of it, A, and you can obviously see why they've chosen the value of A, but of course it could be any letter. And we're going to times that by 8, all right, 8 times A, or 8A, effectively. All right, so that's an expression for the cost of an apple, all right? We just don't know what the cost of one apple is, so we have to take that as a variable, all right? So 8A. What about the number of people on a bus if 2 people get off? All right, well, again, we don't know how many people on the bus, but if I said there were 20 people on the bus and 2 get off, then it would be 2 less, wouldn't it? So in terms of the mass of that, we'd have 20 and we would take away 2. But we don't know that there's 20. So again, we're looking for the variable of the number of people on the bus. So this time I've gone for what I suggested at the beginning. It's called N, and we're going to take away 2 from that. So it's going to be N take away 2. All right, and again, that would be an expression for the number of people on the bus after 2 people have got off. All right, so think about the question, think about what you're saying, think about what you would do if you had a number and what mass you would do to it if you had that number. But of course you don't have that original number, so we just call it a random value or sort of a random letter. All right, often in an awful lot of cases it tends to be N or X, but of course in the example, second example, because it was apples, it just seemed pertinent to call it A. Okay, so that's setting up expression. That kind of goes straight into setting up equations, because a lot of the concept is the same, but you might then have an outcome, or so it might equal something at the end. All right, so that's going to basically provide you with an equation. So when setting an equation, we need to remember that there's an equal sign as part of it. All right, so if I just consider the first part of this, so a number decreased by 5, ignore this bit on the right side for a minute. So a number decreased by 5, well, if I said my number is N, and then decrease it by 5, it'd be N take away 5. But that equals 9. And again, that is then going to form an equation which you should be able to solve. So it's decided to go for X. Nothing wrong with that. So X decreased by 5 is X take away 5. All right, and of course we now know that that equals 9. All right, so that is setting up an equation. Now it doesn't actually ask you to solve it, amazingly enough, but of course we could now figure out what that number was to start with by rearranging this and moving the -5 across. So we're doing the inverse operation to the other side and solve it so that we know that the answer would actually be 14. All right, but it doesn't do it. It doesn't do it. It doesn't ask you to do it. It's just about setting up the equation. Obviously, the next skill set would be, and again, there's another lesson on solving equations, is then what you do with it. And of course, in an exam, that's probably the next step that you would kind of come to. So if you're interested in doing that bit, then please look at solving equations and how to do those. Right, so 6 bananas cost £2. All right, so thinking about the apple example we had not that long ago, well, how do I write the cost of 6 bananas, not knowing what the cost of a banana is? Well, I give it a letter. All right, so thinking about an appropriate letter, then I'm going to guess it's probably going to be a B. So it's going to be 6 times b, isn't it? And that's going to equal 2, or £2, or 200 if you want to do it in pence. Depends on what we're kind of working with. And again, it's not that we're trying to figure out what cost of banana is. It's not asked us that. It's asked you to put an equation together, all right? And like I said, it is likely in an exam they would probably want you therefore to go ask you to go away and figure out what the cost of banana is. Okay, but we're not today. Right, so the perimeter of a square equals 34 centimetres. All right. Well, if you've got the perimeter of a square, what it's suggesting, because it says square, that all the 4 sides are the same. All right, that's the definition of a square. All the sides are the same length. Okay. So if I'm going to write anything, then I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the length of a side. Oh, yeah, do you agree? The length of a side. So let's call the side of the square x. All right, and again, it doesn't have to be. It can be any letter. But we know that 4 of these is equal to 34. All right, because it's 4 sides on a square. They're all the same, and that equals to 34. So the perimeter is x plus x plus x plus x, 4 of them, or 4x, and that is equal to 34. All right, and that's set up an equation. And from there, obviously, you can divide it by 4, and that's going to give you the answer to the length of a square. Doesn't ask you to say anything or do anything like that. It literally just, this is about setting up the equation, and then obviously the next step would be then to kind of solve it. All right. Okay, so that's that one. Finally, setting up formulas, and I guess this is no different to what you've just kind of done. It's taking the words and applying them into a formula this time around. So let's have a look. All right. So again, a little bit like an equation, it's going to have an equal sign, but we're going to, because it's a formula, we're going to have more than one variable with this. All right. So it's not just a case of something equals something else and it being one letter and a number. This is going to have a number of variables into it. So let's have a look. So write a formula for the cost of parking for each hours at £3 per hour. All right. So we don't know what the cost is. We don't know how many hours there are. The only thing that we do know is it's £3 per hour. All right. Okay. So because of that, it's the cost of something equals the number of hours times 3, isn't it? If that makes sense. Because if you think about it, if I said the cost is going to be, so if I say I stayed for 10 hours, for example, 10 hours at £3 per hour, it cost me £30. That would be that would be the cost of it. But I'm writing a formula to represent that. So the cost equals something times 3. All right. So I'm just going to put some letters to that. But it says for h hours, so we're going to use h. So the cost is 3 times the number of hours. So if you kind of symbolize that, the cost is equal to 3h, or 3 times h, effectively. All right. And again, using my example I had before, well, if I said h is 10, or 3 times 10, it's going to give me my cost, which would be £30. Okay. Let's hope it doesn't cost that. It's a long time. Anyway, let's move on to the next example. All right. So the perimeter of a rectangle with sides D and 3D. All right. So the perimeter. All right. So the perimeter is what we're after. So I guess we're going to use the value of P. And then because we want all the sides added together, then it's trying to figure out what I'm going to have. Well, if I've got a rectangle, that means 2 of them are going to be D and the other 2 are going to be 3D. All right, the property of rectangle, 2 sides that are opposite are equal to each other. So therefore, 2 of them, the shorter sides will be D and the 2 of the longer sides will be 3D. All right, and of course, you'll be adding those 4 together. That's going to give you the perimeter. All right, so I'm literally going to write that down. So perimeter equals D plus 3D plus D plus 3D. And the perimeter, therefore, is, well, there's 3 there, there's 6 there, and then another 1 and 1 there. So that's going to give me 8D. So perimeter is 8D. All right, and the reason it's a formula, again, is because in my answer, I have 2 variables. All right, I can't solve it without some additional information. Okay. All right, let's look at one more before we wrap it up. So a person's wage who gets paid £7 an hour plus a £20 bonus. All right, so the wage that they're going to get, maybe W, who gets paid £7 per hour, so it's going to be £7 times something, and then plus 20. All right, because I'm adding a £20 bonus regardless. All right, so let's write that down. So wage is equal to 7 times the number of hours plus 20. All right, and of course, if we just abbreviate it, W is equal to 7 times H plus 20. And of course, if I then said to you, right, well, he works 40 hours, then I would do 7 times 40, because how much it gets per hour, plus £20 as a bonus, and that's how much weight you would get. All right, so that is your formula taken from words. All right, so just read it very, very carefully and think about how to kind of put it together. All right, I would suggest if you need some practice on that one or you're a bit unclear on it, please obviously visit maths-school.co.uk. The link is at the bottom of the page as normal. Lots of kind of questions for you to have a go at, and of course you can revisit this video at any point. All right, well, thanks for listening.